Hey guys, Mike here. Today I got a bourbon review. We're going to take a look at Elmer T. Lee. This comes from Buffalo Trace. It's a single barrel straight bourbon from Buffalo Trace. One of my favorites. This is a great value bourbon. It's a good quality bourbon. It gets a lot of hype among the bourbon nerd circles, but not quite the hype it probably deserves. It's a great flavorful, good value bourbon. Kind of, I'd call it an everyday bourbon. It's not too expensive, but it's a really nice pour when you're looking for a nice middle of the road type bourbon. So this is I call it a standard bourbon. It uses Buffalo Trace's number 2 mash, which has a number of products on this. It's about a 13% rye. That's how I look at bourbon, how much rye it has. Either no rye, like a wheated bourbon, a low rye, a medium rye, which I call standard, or a high rye. This one is a medium at about 13% or so. And this is named after the legendary master distiller, Elmer T. Lee. He joined Buffalo Trace back in 1949, and he worked his way up to master distiller. And after he retired, pour a nice little glass there, in the mid-80s or so, they asked him, like, hey, can we make a bourbon, name it after Elmer T. Lee? And the story goes he agreed as long as he could pick out the barrels. And that sounds like a pretty cool retirement. You come back to the distillery every once in a while, sample a bunch of bourbon barrels, pick out the ones you like, and put it in your own bottle, with your name on it. That sounds pretty cool. So, again, this comes from the number 2 mash here at Buffalo Trace. There's a few other mash that has a few other bourbons that they put out with this mash. Another one I really liked is Blanton's, which also is named after another distiller there from Buffalo Trace. That was before Elmer T. Lee. And also another was Hancock's President's Reserve, which was named after a settler who settled the area where Buffalo Trace is located. Rock Hill Farm, that's another one that has the number 2 mash, and there's Ancient Age and Ancient Age. And actually there's another one that uses it, we'll talk about here in a minute, that's not actually put out by Buffalo Trace. So a lot of different bourbons actually use the same mash, but they vary a little bit depending which warehouse they're in. And, where they're stored at the warehouse. That's what's kind of cool about bourbon is no barrel is exactly the same. And a single barrel bourbon, really you get variation from almost bottle to bottle because each bottle could potentially come from a different barrel. And what they do is they sit down and they try to find certain characteristics of the bottle or of the bourbon as a reference, and that gives it its specific character. So even though it has the same recipe, so same mash, same grains and cereal go into it, it's a little bit different based on where it was stored. Now, Elmer T. Lee, his favorite warehouse reportedly was Warehouse I and K. They're lettered at Buffalo Trace, and that's where they pulled his barrels. So that gives it a little unique characteristic, how those barrels or how those warehouses age and where they're located within the warehouse. So it gives a little bit of an interesting flavor and profile to this. So one of the interesting thing I found, there's an interview, I'll put a link to it here in the description of the video, is Elmer actually likes his bourbon with 7-Up. 7-Up on the rocks. So if you're a bourbon nerd, you want to drink it neat, kind of like we'll do right here. And mixers are a little bit frowned on, but I like it too, especially in the summertime. Like, right now it gets a little warm. Bourbon's a little bit more cold weather kind of feel thing. But you go ahead and take a nice bourbon, like Elmer T. Lee, and put it on some ice and a little 7-Up, and I like a little wedge of lime. It's pretty good, actually. So, but it's good this way, too. So, that's basically the deal here. This is aged about 9-10 years. It doesn't have an age statement, meaning there's nothing on the bottle. It says how long it's aged. But, general rule of thumb, it's 9-10. Probably maybe some of them down to 8 or so. And it's bottled at 45%, which is a nice bottling proof. Not too high, but still substantial enough to give you something. So, all right, let's take a look here what we got. So all the Buffalo Trace to me is kind of fruity. It has a fruity, get some apples, to it. And kind of a honey, caramel, lots of caramel, and vanilla, kind of cookies a little bit. That's like that's a good bourbon. It just kind of reminds you of cookies, chocolate chip cookies a little bit. It has a nice woody oakiness to it. So let's try it out. It has a nice bourbon. It has a nice woody character, nice oaky character to it, but not overpowering. So it's pretty mild in that aspect, but you get that fruity apple kind of flavor. Yeah, this is a good one. So this is one of my favorite bourbons, I'd say, especially for the price. You don't need to add any water to it. 90% is fine. If you want, you can add a little drop of water to it. I don't have my little spoon or dropper here, so we'll just very delicately put a little drop and a little bit of water. They kind of open it up a little bit. Just kind of gives a little different profile to it. Mm-hmm. You get a little bit of the rye to it, a little bit of the rye spice, a little bit of a mintiness to it, but it's nice, sweet, toasted oak. Has good oak flavor. It's not real high alcohol, so it's pretty easy drinking kind of. You can definitely sip it. I usually don't add water to this one. I just really kind of enjoy just sipping this one. So this is a Elmer T. Lee, one of my favorite bourbons. Again, I can get this for mid $30 or so, $34, $35, I think is the price here in Michigan now. The minimum price the state regulates, the minimum price they can go for it. So great bourbon at that price. It can be a little tricky to find, especially lately. What Buffalo Trace has been doing is, they have a batch. They do a batch and they ship out a bunch of bottles. And when the bottles are gone, they're kind of gone till the next time they do it a few months later, when they get some more barrels ready to go. So depending, where you're located, some states have good availability, some states have a little bit lesser availability. And depending when you are on the shipment, it could be a little bit tough to find. But if you find a bottle and you haven't tried this one, I definitely recommend checking it out. Mm-hmm. Nice oak and vanilla and caramel to it. Real nice. All right, so what I like to do is, okay, let's say you can't find Elmer T. Lee, or maybe you've tried some other bourbons that are like Elmer T. Lee, or maybe you just want to research a little more and say like, hey, what other bourbons could I take a look at? So what I like to do is give some other options. So these are all standard bourbons, so about the same rye percentage. That's kind of how I classify bourbons, as how much rye it has, because that gives a pretty definitive flavor to them, and about the same price. So somewhere $30 to $40 or so. And this is a big category, actually about $30, $35 for me. And your pricing may vary, wherever you're at, but, relatively pricing should be the same. And let's start with this one. So this is the Bowman Brothers. This is the Bowman Brothers small batch, right? Yeah, Bowman Brothers small batch. Now, what's interesting about Bowman Brothers is they actually get their distillate from Buffalo Trace. So it's the same number 2 mash that they get from Buffalo Trace. They truck it over to Virginia and they distill it an extra time, so a third time. And then they age it in Virginia. So, like I said, the barrels change from where you are in the warehouse. Well, this is on the other side of the Appalachian Mountains, so totally different profile. I find this one's a little bit milder, a little bit lighter. So check this one out. You might really enjoy this one also. And this is actually a little bit cheaper for me than Elmer T. Lee. Another one you can check out is Russell Reserve. They're 10-year. They're small batch, a little bit older, maybe somewhere same older. This one comes from Wild Turkey. Again, price about the same. Has a unique flavor. Wild Turkey kind of has a little bit of a unique flavor to this. Is another good one to try out. And a third one, we'll try to always give you 3, is Evan Williams. They're single barrel. This comes out. There's yearly batches. So every year, this is the 2013, the 2003 vintage. The 2003-4 is out right now. And you can check that one out too. But this is a good one. And there's another one from Heaven Hill. This comes from Heaven Hill. Is the Henry McKenna single barrel. That's another good one that I really like. So both those are really good, but technically I gave you 4, I guess. So there you guys, a look here at Elmer T. Lee from Buffalo Trace, a pretty nice single barrel bourbon. One of the ones I definitely like. And my ratings, I give it out of 5. I give it a 4.5. If you're interested in checking out any of these other bourbons, I did a text review on these. Maybe I'll do a video review on them. So I'll link to the description if you want to read about those too also. All right, guys. See you later.